houses that have gone extinct in the thousands of years of Westerosi history are often remembered simply for that very fact. But the ironic twist of fate is there's more houses in lore that have become forgotten over time, even though they themselves still exist. In some cases, these houses had close calls with extinction. In others, they were once much larger and held power, only for it to decline so rapidly they have become somewhat forgotten as the glory days fade into distant memory. In this video, I've picked a couple of these forgotten houses that I want to talk about, what happened to them, and how they came to be forgotten. There's some really obscure houses on this list, but also some larger ones that you will likely know of, but whose fortunes have declined so much, to many in Westeros they might as well be forgotten. Had Lady Lara and her brothers been Westerosi, they might have been admired and celebrated, but their foreign birth, foreign ways and foreign gods made them objects of mistrust and suspicion instead. The writings of Archmaester Gildane on House Rogare, Fire and Blood, the Lysene Spring, and the End of Regency. House Rogare is a bit of a rogue pick by me, if I'm being honest, because the house, or at least in the form that we know of it, may have actually gone extinct around the reign of Aegon III and Viserys II. There is a lot to be fleshed out lore-wise still by George R. R. Martin post Aegon III's regency, for us to really know for sure. But the reason I want to include House Rogare on this list is because for a very brief moment the house rose out of seemingly nowhere to the second house in the realm, with every Targaryen born from King Viserys II's bloodline also descending from House Rogare. Yes, that includes everyone in the timeline of the main books. Dany, Viserys, the Mad King, Rhaegar, and if you want to include him, Jon Snow. So for such an important house, how did they end up as a footnote in history that I'd wager even most Targaryens would have forgotten about? House Rogare was one of the wealthiest and most influential banking dynasties from Lys, a family that claimed descent from the blood of old Valyria itself, reaching back to the age before the doom of Valyria. In the years that followed the Dance of the Dragons, the Rogares forged close ties with the rulers of Westeros. They had come into the possession of the young Prince Viserys Targaryen, brother of King Aegon III, during the Dance of the Dragons. They married Lady Lara Rogare to Prince Viserys, while her uncle Drizzenko Rogare went on to marry Princess Alliandra Martell, Princess of Dorne, binding the family to the two most powerful courts in the known world. At the height of their influence, the Rogare Bank grew so vast that it rivaled even the Iron Bank of Braavos in its wealth and reach. During the troubled years of the Lysene Spring, the family became deeply entangled in the politics and intrigue of King's Landing, their fortunes rising and falling alongside the chaos of the realm. The return of Prince Viserys to Westeros in 134 AC was met with widespread great celebration throughout the realm. King Aegon III, who had long carried guilt over losing his brother during the Battle of the Gullet, rejoiced at Viserys' return, and the court in King's Landing shared in that relief. Not all were pleased, however. Lord Unwin Peake, then the Hand of the King, was outraged by the immense ransom demanded for the prince's release. Despite his protest, the Regency agreed to pay the sum in 10 yearly instalments, and further consented to transfer royal funds from the Iron Bank of Braavos to the Rogare Bank of Lys. In protest, Unwin resigned the handship, and Lord Thaddeus Rowan succeeded him. The arrival of Viserys' Lysene wife, Lara Rogare, drew the powerful Rogare family deeply into the politics of Westeros. Several of her brothers accompanied her to King's Landing. Morado Rogare commanded her guards. Lotho Rogare established a branch of the Rogare Bank upon Visenya's Hill, and Rogario Rogare opened up an infamous pillow house known as the Mermaid near the Rivergate. For a time, the wealth of the Rogares transformed King's Landing. Trade with the Free Cities flourished, enriching the ports and towns across the realm, from Duskendale and Maidenpool to Old Town and White Harbour. The Rogare Bank grew so powerful that some claimed it even rivaled and surpassed the Iron Bank during this era. Their influence also weakened the authority of King Aegon III's regents, as increasing amounts of royal finances passed through Lysene hands. These prosperous years were marked as well with joyous events, including Lady Rhaena Targaryen's flight upon her dragon morning, and the birth of Prince Aegon to Viserys and Lara, the future King Aegon IV. Yet resentments simmered beneath this prosperity. Many of the Westerosi, nobility and small folk alike distrusted the Lysene, viewing them as decadent foreigners, devout to strange gods rather than the faith of the Seven. At the same time, famine in the north, turmoil in the Vale, and raids upon the western coasts fostered growing unrest, while darker omens spread fear through the capital, among them monstrous creatures hatched from Lysene Valaryon's dragon egg, and the poisoning of Gaemon Powhair. The Rogare downfall came swiftly. Lysandro Rogare and his brother Drazanko died within days of one another, under suspicious circumstances. Deaths some whispered were the work of the Faceless Men. Chaos followed in Lys as rival magisters turned upon the family. Their heirs proved unequal to the crisis. The Rogare Bank collapsed under panic and withdrawals, and the family's fortunes were shattered. Some fled, others enslaved, tortured or killed. In Westeros, the collapse triggered panic and conspiracy. Morado abandoned command in the Vale and sailed for Braavos, while Lotho and Rogario were seized and imprisoned. The Hand, Lord Rowan himself, was arrested, along with dozens of retainers and servants. Matters escalated in what became known as the Secret Siege, when Aegon III and Prince Viserys barricaded themselves inside Maegor's Holdfast to protect Lara Rogare from arrest. Confessions extracted under torture implicated numerous powerful figures, including Sir Marsden Waters, Sir Garth Long, Septon Bernard, Sir Victor Risley, Lucas Lagood, and others tied to the old Peake faction at court. The Fool Mushroom later suggested that Unwin Peake and Clarice Osgrey had orchestrated the conspiracy against the Rogares, though no proof was ever found. Violence followed swiftly. Lucas Lagood was killed, resisting arrest. Marsden Waters mortally wounded. Mervyn Flower was beaten to death, and several conspirators fled or took the black. The Hand, Thaddeus Rowan, broke by torture, died soon after while journeying home to Golden Grove. The aftermath reshaped the realm once again. By 136 AC, nobles from across Westeros gathered in King's Landing, in numbers not seen since the Great Council of 101 AC. New regents and officers of the crown were appointed, while surviving conspirators faced punishment, ranging from exile and imprisonment to forced vows with the Faith or the Night's Watch. The ruin of the Rogare Bank devastated countless merchants and lords who had entrusted it with their wealth. Lotho Rogare later helped establish the Bank of Old Town after losing his hand, while Rogario Rogare abandoned King's Landing and resumed his trade elsewhere. Lord Torren Manderly and Isambard Arryn eventually reformed royal taxation to stabilise the realm's financial collapse. Lara Rogare remained in King's Landing for several years after the fall of her family, though she never truly felt at ease there again. In 139 AC, after giving birth to Princess Nerys and Prince Aemon Targaryen, she finally fled. It is not clear what happened to the surviving members of the house after their downfall, but their blood in House Baratheon via House Targaryen do still sit the Iron Throne at the start of the main book series. Tonight I am to sup with my lord's bannermen, such as they are. Celtigar, Velaryon, Bar Aemon, the whole Ploughtree lot of them, a poor crop if truth be told. But they are what my brothers have left me. Stannis Baratheon to Maester Crescent, A Clash of Kings, Prologue. House Celtigar is an extremely overlooked and underappreciated house, both within lore and within the A Song of Ice and Fire fanbase as a whole. They are what I like to call the Forgotten Valyrian house, the others being House Targaryen and House Velaryon, all of whom trace origins back to Old Valyria. Part of why I think they fell to the wayside of their Valyrian kin has a lot to do with their seat and economics. House Targaryen were obviously a powerful house even before the conquest, thanks to their dragons. House Velaryon, even before the level of riches Corlys Velaryon brought to the house, was still very rich, turning Driftmark into an important trading hub in the Narrow Sea. While Claw Isle, the seat of House Celtigar, is a strong seat, it didn't offer them the political and economic opportunities of the other Valyrian houses. Thus, while they grew into a powerful house, House Celtigar falls into the group of more minor houses. Another telling sign of how they did not wield the significance of the other Valyrian houses is the fact their blood never married into House Targaryen, even though it would have made sense for them to do so. House Targaryen, as we know, practiced incestuous marriages, often between siblings. However, in cases where this wasn't possible, they would often look to House Velaryon, another Valyrian-blooded house, to fill that gap. Despite there being opportunities where they could have turned to House Celtigar, who had the same old Valyrian blood, the lords and later kings of House Targaryen always looked to House Velaryon. Why? Because it's not just about blood, but politics as well. House Velaryon offered House Targaryen not just Valyrian blood, but their economic power, large navy, and key seat, all of which was a huge benefit, none of which House Celtigar were able to offer. Despite all of this, House Celtigar was still a loyal house to House Targaryen, being one of the first mainland houses to bend the knee during the conquest, and being part of the small council of many a Targaryen king. House Velaryon actually present an interesting conundrum. Many readers and viewers of the TV shows now view House Velaryon as one of the major big houses of Westeros, mostly thanks to their involvement in the Dance of the Dragons, and how much they were fleshed out in Fire and Blood, playing a massive role in the politics of Westeros, from the conquest to the dance in 129 AC. So my point here is House Velaryon were one of the most rich and powerful houses of Westeros before a sudden and dramatic downfall they would never recover from, leading to the sorry state of the house in the main book series. Several queen consorts were members of House Velaryon. Until 129 AC, the role of Master of Ships was typically given to a member of the house. Their fleet of warships were in effect the royal fleet, and Corlys Velaryon, the Sea Snake, made the house so wealthy prior to the dance, they outshone even House Lannister in terms of riches. Corlys' transformation of Driftmark into an even bigger economic powerhouse than it already was is also an important factor. The truth is, the Dance of the Dragons began the decline of the house. By the end of the war, their fleet was shattered. Their gold diminished greatly. Driftmark itself so brutally sacked it never recovered to its former glory. The death of Corlys Velaryon marked the end of an era of prosperity and influence. There was a brief resurgence under Alan Velaryon during the Regency and reign of King Aegon III, but in reality, the influence of Lord Alan had much more to do with him as a person rather than his Velaryon connections itself. Since the downfall of House Targaryen under King Aerys II, the Mad King, House Velaryon had been sworn to House Baratheon of Dragonstone, and thus Stannis Baratheon. Lord Mumford Velaryon does support Stannis during the War of the Five Kings, and supplies 4 ships to him, a shadow of the naval power the house were able to command prior to the Dance of the Dragons. They do, however, remain one of Stannis' biggest supporters, even remaining loyal to him after their defeat at the Battle of the Blackwater. House Velaryon, in my view, shows us how a house can slowly become a forgotten house. While they have a rich history, took centre stage in Westerosi politics, you would never have guessed that fact, given the state of the house during the events of the main book series. So while they are not strictly forgotten, they are certainly not as prominent as they once were, and sadly, seemed doomed to decline further into obscurity as other houses around them rise. House Plumm are another case of a house where you think, looking at their history, they should have ended up with a lot more power and influence than they did. Most readers will know House Plumm via their small role in the main book series, through Harwin Plumm and Brown Ben Plumm. But if you actually take some time to delve into their history, there was a moment where they very easily could have become one of the more powerful houses in the realm via a direct connection to the royal family. The aged Lord Ossifer Plumm married Princess Aelena Targaryen in 176 AC, one of the daughters of King Aegon III. The marriage quickly became the subject of scandal and mockery throughout the realm, as Ossifer is said to have died during the bedding ceremony itself, though not before conceiving an heir. In later years, rumours spread that the old lord had perished before the marriage was even consummated, and that Aelena's child in proof had been fathered by her cousin, the future King Aegon IV. From these tales rose the bawdy jest that Ossifer Plumm possessed a member 6 feet long, having supposedly fathered a son after death. Whatever the truth of the matter, Aelena's son, Viserys Plumm, inherited the lands and titles of House Plumm. He continued to rule through the reign of King Daeron II, and remained lord well into the early years of King Aerys I. Don't get me wrong, House Plumm was still a well-respected house with a history dating back to the age of the First Men, but given such close connections with House Targaryen, it's surprising they never made use of them with marriages or roles at court. Interestingly, there are other descendants of Aelena Targaryen that are also surprising that they didn't actually become more prominent. We are of course talking about House Longwaters, arguably one of the most forgotten houses in the realm. Though Lord Alan Velaryon fathered children by his lady wife Baela Targaryen, he was long associated with Princess Aelena, who was herself Baela's half-niece. From their relationship came two bastard children, John and Jane Waters. It's not clear whether Alan himself knew of their existence, as the children may have been born only after he sailed upon his final voyage, from which he never returned. Despite his illegitimate birth, John Waters rose to great renown as a knight. His own son, born lawfully within marriage, carried no taint of bastardy and adopted the name Longwaters to mark this distinction. The line endures in quiet service to the crown, and generations later one of their descendants, Rennifer Longwaters, served the Baratheon kings as chief underjailer of the dungeons beneath the Red Keep. Given that close connection to the royal family, again it's surprising House Longwaters never actually rose higher than the small place at court they currently hold. So much so that their Targaryen descent seems all but forgotten by a vast majority of people, when you consider that some could argue that House Longwaters could be considered a cadet branch of House Targaryen and House Velaryon. Makes this omission even stranger. Perhaps it's more to do with the fact that both houses wanted to bury and forget the scandal of Alan and Aelena. House Lannister of Lannisport, in my view, is a forgotten house by the very nature of their existence, being a small cadet branch of the much more powerful and well-known House Lannister of Casterly Rock. The Lannisters from Casterly Rock developed Lannisport from a small village into a town and then a city. The Lannisters of Lannisport would prosper off this trade, building a wall to defend the city, while the Lannisters of Casterly Rock became the Kings of the Rock. It's not certain when this split from the Casterly Rock Lannisters happened, but it's described as being in ancient times, which means they could be one of the oldest cadet branches in Westeros. If the main Lannister branch didn't exist, it's possible the Lannisport branch might be considered one of the richest and most powerful houses in Westeros. Lannisport is the main port city on the western coast, with countless gold and goods passing through it. But it speaks to just how rich and powerful the Casterly Rock branch really is that the Lannisport branch is living both physically and metaphorically in their shadow. The way many of the mainline Lannisters talk about their cousins always comes across as a bit scornful. Really, the smoking gun is that most readers and characters in the book hardly acknowledge the existence of House Lannister of Lannisport, with some even forgetting that Casterly Rock does not directly rule Lannisport itself, but via their cousins. I do wonder, however, if the main Casterly Rock line did die out, House Lannister of Lannisport could step in to fill that power vacuum. They certainly have the gold and manpower to do so, and would have a decent claim on the rock itself, even if the split between the branches happened back in ancient times. The Hightowers are an ancient family, very rich and very proud. Draw a moment to Daenerys Targaryen, A Clash of Kings Chapter 12, Daenerys 1. Now, in the first draft of this script, I spent a lot of time talking about House Hightower and why I think they are a forgotten house in Westeros. But when I sat down and thought about it some more, I don't think that really holds up anymore. Their role in the main book does not reflect their larger role in the history of Westeros. If you just base your view of House Hightower on the content from the main book series, you might walk away with the impression that while they were a big house, they don't come close to the likes of the Tyrells, Lannisters or Baratheons. They very much play a supporting role in the wider politics of Westeros at this point in time, yet are still one of the largest, richest and most ancient houses. You see, it's not until you delve into the expanded history and lore of Westeros you see the true power of House Hightower. They were kings in their own right for thousands of years, only losing their kingship to the mighty Gardener kings. Under the rule of House Gardener, they really were the second house in the kingdom. Plus, you have Old Town itself, the oldest and largest city in Westeros for thousands of years. Its port the gateway to the western coast, with trade from Essos coming into Westeros via Old Town, making House Hightower one of the richest houses in the realm, even operating their own bank. When Aegon conquered Westeros, it was a surprise to many that the Hightowers were not made Lord Paramount of the Reach. Don't get me wrong, there are actually some really big reasons why not giving them that power was a smart move by the Conqueror, but that's a topic for another time. Countless men of House Hightower served in several small councils and took positions within the Kingsguard. And of course, their role in the Dance of the Dragons, with House Hightower making up a vast part of the Green faction, due to Otto Hightower being Hand, and Alicent the Queen of King Viserys I, and mother of King Aegon II. Some assume that after the dance, House Hightower had some kind of downfall, like House Velaryon, but it's not really the case. If anything, they actually got richer and more influential. I think the reason they may have seemed a forgotten house is because most of their history and lore happened prior to the start of the main books, with them having a limited role in them. Fire and Blood, and later House of the Dragon, really changed how people view the house and their status. That is kind of understandable why you could choose to view them as a forgotten house, given how much of their role in history was retroactively added into lore.